all, would like to, on behalf of Karen Hussey, apologies she can't be here today, but she had a prior commitment. So I'm really just going to introduce the work that we're doing within the regulatory and governance space for the RRAP project. So there's myself, or Pedro, Karen and Chris McGrath, and we're really sort of scoping out and mapping and going through the sort of permutations. If you want to do this, this is the sort of process in which it takes place. So Pedro will sort of run through how the sort of the findings of that and where we've got to, and then we've sort of got different areas. So currently at the moment we're just working on 3 case studies or 3 interventions, and we hope to scale that up over the rest of the year to apply a model that we're developing into sort of different ways of looking. So, one of the key approaches for this project is a really kind of grassroots, bottom-up approach, working with the key authorities right at the very beginning. So we really want to thank Great Barrier Reef Marine Park Authority, the Office of Gene Technology Regulators, OGBR, and of course AIMS. So what we've been doing within our method, we've been scoping out the regulatory space and looking at the governance and looking where we might find issues or gaps that aren't currently there. I mean, it is a little bit of sort of trying to peek into the future, because you're talking about stuff that is still, as we all know from this conference, being developed. But we do know that certain projects, as we've heard over the last couple of days, are gaining momentum, and so that's the sort of area we've been looking at. And one of the key things that we've done is to engage with GARUMPA particularly, because at the end of the day it's GARUMPA who issue the permits and who are going to be at the sort of front of some of these processes. So we've had a series of ground truthing processes where we've had workshops both with AIMS and GARUMPA people, and we've kind of gone, well, we think it's this. What do you think? And they've gone, oh no, it's far more complicated than that. And so we've gone away, and Pedro will explain it, and we've come back, and we've done that 3 times now. And so really important from our perspective to be engaging and using that knowledge, because it's partly, as some of the GARUMPA guys have said, a lot of it's in their head, and a lot of it's obviously written down, but some of it, until you start having those conversations about the possibility of assisted gene flow or the possibility of surface film, you don't really start thinking about the nuances of what it entails, where risk is. So this has been really important in our process. So really, our rationale for the study has been to look at the different innovations, to look at what the existing landscape is, so what's currently there. So we know there's the obvious, like the Great Barrier Reef Park Act, the EPBC, the kind of the ones that you would consider, but then there are certain ones that you may need to consider when it comes to sort of edging to the outer reef, maybe international laws or ones that are around, particularly sea dumping. So we've looked at the different implications that there are, the regulations, and then we've plotted that through the process. And in 3 steps we've taken. So first of all, we mapped the governance and the landscape. Sorry, this screen isn't on, that's why I'm having to turn. Then we've done an approach where we've done a desktop literature review. We've analysed and looked at different examples. We've identified what the current landscape is, and that's particularly where Chris McGrath's work came in. So looking at the legislative and the sort of legal side. And then we have begun examining the interventions. So on our tag team method, I'm going to introduce Pedro now, who will come up, and Pedro's been doing all the heavy lifting, and some of you will have seen this diagram, but this is to sort of explain how we see the regulatory space working with GARUMPA.
Hello everyone, I have to say that I'm a bit surprised that so many people came to this presentation early this morning after the function last night, but thanks for coming. So I will take you through the main objectives of this project, which was mapping the governance landscape. We developed an approach to scope regulatory issues, and we applied this approach to look at selected interventions. So this is our map of the governance landscape. Don't be scared. There is 2. Just relax. Don't try to read it or anything. I'll tell you what the main points are. the main point here is that to show that the landscape is rather complex, right? And the other point is that we have two clusters of arrangements, and we're going to have a look at those. So we can see that many of the governance arrangements, they cluster around Rubamba and the state government. That's because Rubamba is the main responsible for the management of the park. But this management is shared with the state government. So in this context, any intervention will necessarily involve permit under the GBR Marine Park Act. Okay. So depending on the nature of the intervention, it also may require permits under other legislation. For example, if it involves significant impacts on the I think I'm going to present downstairs. Is that all right? It's a lot more comfortable. And I'll try to speak as loud as I can. So depending on the nature of the activity, it will trigger several other legislation. So if it's got a significant impact on the reef, it will trigger the EPDC. Oh, that's all right. So if it's triggered the APDC, it will trigger the APDC Act. If it involves fisheries, fishery assets, or marine planes, including algae, the legislation talk about algae as being marine planes, and apologies to the scientists here. So we will trigger the Fisheries Act under the Department of Fisheries, Agriculture and Fisheries. If it involves structures, it will trigger the Sea Dumping Act. What I'm trying to say is that depending on the location, if it's in the park or outside the park, several legislations will be affected. So we use that framework to look at selected interventions. So we look at surface films, artificial reefs, and genetic engineering. So if you saw the presentation by Andrew Debris yesterday, you saw that surface film reflects solar radiation and reduce water temperatures, and therefore reduce thermal bleaching of corals. Surface films would be deployed when bleaching conditions are predicted, and the application would involve, would be in the form of spray, and could be undertaken using drones, planes, vessels, and automated bodies. So as any intervention in the marine park, surface film will necessarily require a permit under Rubamba, right? So this is the most simple case that we have. And the permit system under Rubamba may involve several phases, including a scoping phase where the initial concepts, designs, and alternatives for interventions are discussed with the applicant. And then it's followed by the assessment phase and decision phase. And in case of the permit is granted, there may be, there is the audit and compliance phase where in case of non-compliance, there may be further action. So, and also Rubamba has developed a draft guidelines for applications for interventions to improve resilience of coral reef. So in these guidelines, which are in a draft form, the guidelines don't necessarily refer to surface film, but we anticipate that the surface films are likely to be considered as of medium risk, and may require, as a result, proof of concept, supporting rationale for likely success in the marine park. So our second intervention is artificial reefs. Many of you may be familiar with artificial reefs. There's man-made structures from a variety of materials. They may have different shapes, sizes, and types of surface. And they provide new substrate for corals to settle. And therefore, they improve the process. Okay? In producing the artificial reefs, a manufacturing plant may be required. And the artificial structures may be deployed in the marine environment using workboats or barges. So artificial reefs, again, as any intervention in the marine park, will require a permission under RRAP. Okay. Further, it is likely to require permission under the Seabed Act and the Fisheries Act as well. And as I said, if we are developing facilities inland to produce these structures, we're going to we have to deal with the planning arrangements at the state level. So in the RRAP draft guidelines, artificial reefs are considered of high risk. Don't ask me why, but yeah, it's considered as a high risk. So as such, we need to meet a series of requirements. Among them, a proof of concept, a public information a package, a bond, a public and environmental report, and environmental impact statement assessment, and so forth. And this is the third and last intervention that we look at using our framework. This is perhaps the most complex case in terms of regulations, particularly because of the nature of the intervention. So genetic engineering, which is the manipulation of genetic material to enhance the tolerance of corals to warm waters, which can help corals to resist, repair, recover from bleaching events. So it would be involve trials in a controlled environment, followed by field trials, and then if and when trials proved successful, the manipulated organisms would be released in the marine environment. This is a very, it's a huge simplification what we're presenting here. Genetic engineering involves a wide range of technologies and a wide range of outcomes. So we're just making a very general consideration here. So again, genetic engineering in the context of the marine park will require a permit from RRAP in addition to the other regulatory requirements. Especially the gene technology, under the Gene Technology Act. I will talk a little bit more about the Gene Technology Act, but any, what they call the legislation called dealings with genetic modified organisms will require a license. And the same for research undertaken in the lab involving genetic modified organisms. So genetic engineering is also regarded as of high risk under the draft guidelines, and would also be required to meet at least some of these requirements. So under the Gene Technology Act, any activity involving genetic modified organisms, even transporting or require a license from the Office of Gene Technology regulator. So in general terms, the application would involve, application for permit, the process of permitting would involve the gene technology regulator preparing a risk assessment and a risk management plan for the proposed intervention. In doing that, it needs to consider advice from the states, in the case of corals in the Great Barrier Reef, advice from the Queensland government, advice from the Gene Technology Technical Advisory Committee, relevant federal agencies, most likely Rubamba among others, the Environment Minister, and region submissions from the public. So we have an initial contact with the Office of Gene Technology Regulator, and they anticipate that applications involve gene technology in coral reefs would require the applicants to provide scientifically reviewed evidence, information about reducing risks, and the identification of testing sites. They are isolated. But this is some charted territory. Up to date, the Gene Technology Regulator are dealing mostly with issues relating to agriculture and food. So coral reefs is something that is, it's something really new. It may be new, in Northern Australia, but we're first in the world when you have to get permit to do genetic modifications with coral reefs. We also looked at capacity challenges within the regulators. 2 minutes? Yep, okay, 2 minutes. So wrapping up, we also looked at capacity challenges within regulators, and they anticipated that with the level, with the new technologies in the context of RRAP, they anticipate that adequate resources will be needed to address technologies dealing with cutting-edge science and the associated risks, impacts, and ethical issues. They also warned that they may have an increase in permit applications, and this would put the system under considerable stress, given that some of the regulators are at full capacity already. For example, Rubamba has 3 people looking at close to 200 permits a year. So that's a concern. The other one is that the system, as the regulatory system, is robust. We found it is robust. However, it's fragmented and involved duplication, and may not be operating as effectively as it could. As I showed, many of the interventions involve more than one permit from different agencies at federal and state level. So, that's a problem that can hinder the deployment of some of these more complex application interventions. But there are good signs. Rubamba has established some joint arrangements with the state government that simplify the application process. There's also arrangements with the Department of Environment and Energy with regards to the EPBC Act that also streamline the process of permits. So the next step, we suggested the next step would the relevant regulators would come together to see how we can improve the system. And I'll leave it there. Thank you.
We'll take a question.
Hi, so Rhiannon Gilbert from the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park Authority. I just wanted to make a few clarifications. Thank you, Pedro, for that.
Yes, please.
I didn't want you all to go away thinking we're useless. We actually have 13 people working on 200 applications a year, not 3. The 3 that Pedro is referring to are the 3 dedicated research assessment officers. So we do currently only have 3 dedicated research assessment officers where your projects will filter through those three. But we also have major projects, and well, as you all know, we also regulate tourism. So I just wanted to clarify that. And I also wanted to let everyone know that I am having a workshop this afternoon. Please come and join us. It is an opportunity to feed into this draft guideline. I saw a lot of you shaking your heads, like how could we make artificial reefs a high risk? We're open to your ideas. It is a draft, so please come and tell us what you think. And we're not going to finalize that draft until about 2 or 3 weeks from today. So we're open to all your suggestions. So please come and join us this afternoon.
Thanks a lot, Brian. As Max put, we owe a lot to Bumpan and all the regulators, but any misrepresentation is our fault. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Pedro.